Welcome back to Reading Story and Friends. Today we are reading, drumroll please, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. You know, like what it says from Narnia, then the whole poster thing. You know this book? The Chronicles of Narnia? Book 2. I didn't want to read book 1 because then you'll know who. I'm not like you won't know who the grandfather is, but still, I think you know. I'll tell you when at the end of the book. And 17 days of reading it. Now I'm going to read it back in this kitty cat mask. And I'm going to wear next Halloween. This Halloween. Narnia, the land beyond the wardrobe. The secret country known only to Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. The place where the adventure begins. Lucy's the first to find the secret of the wardrobe in the Professor's Mystery's old house. At first, no one believes her when she tells of her adventures in the land of Narnia. Dun, dun, dun! But as soon as Peter and Susan discover the magic and meet Aslan, the great lion, for themselves in a blink of an eye, their lives changed forever. Enter the enchanted world countless times in the Chronicles of Narnia. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, I love saying that. So, I'm going to read one chapter of this book. That's only 4 or 8 pages. Wait, I always look at this. When was this book published? 1 second. $1950. That's when this happened. Chapter 1. Lucy looks into a wardrobe. I don't have a wardrobe, but a wardrobe. And I don't have a witch either. Actually, I do. It's right there. The wardrobe. Once there were 4 children whose names were Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. This story is about something that happened to them when they were sent away from London during the war because of air raids. They were sent to the house of an old professor who lived in the heart of the country, 10 miles of the nearest railway station and 2 miles from the nearest post office. He had no wife, and he lived in a very large house with a housekeeper called Miss Mercury and 3 servants. Their names are Ivy, Margaret, and Betty, but they do not come into the story that much. He himself was a very old man with shaggy white hair and grew over the most of his face as well on his head, and they liked him almost at once. But on the first evening when he came out to meet them at the front door, he was so odd-looking that Lucy, who was the youngest, was a little afraid of him. Not be afraid. He had a long beard. Hey, a long white beard. Like Santa. And Edmund, who was the next youngest, wanted to laugh and had to keep on pretending that he was blowing his nose to hide it. That's mean. Why would you laugh about someone? Oh, because they look weird and have a big beard and a mustache. As soon as they had said good night to the professor and gone upstairs for the first night, the boys came into the girls' room and they all talked it over. "We've fallen on our feet, and no mistake," said Peter. "This is going to be perfectly splendid." "That old chap will let us do anything we like. I think he's an old dear." "He's an old dear," said Susan. "Oh, come of it," said Edmund, who was trying to pretend to not be tired, which has always made him bad temper. Don't you go on talking like that." "Like what?" said Susan. "And anyway, it's time for you were in bed." "Trying to talk like mother," said Edmund. And who are you to say when I'm going to bed? Go to bed yourself." "Hadn't we all better go to bed?" said Lucy. There's sure to be a row if we ever heard here." "Nope, there won't," said Peter. "And I'll tell you this sort of a house where there's no one going to mind 10 minutes walk away from the dining room, and any amount of stairs passage between." "What's that noise?" said Lucy suddenly. It was a far louder house than she had ever been before, and the thought of all those long passages and rows of doors leading into empty rooms was beginning to make her feel a little creepy. "It's only a bird, silly," said Edmund. "It's an owl," said Peter. "This is going to be a wonderful place for birds." "I shall go to bed now. I say, let's go and explore tomorrow. You might find anything in a place like this. Did you see those mountains as we came along? And the woods? There might be eagles. There might be stags. There might be hawks. Badgers," said Lucy. "Foxes," said Edmund. "Rabbits," said Susan. But when the next morning came, there was a steady rain falling, so thick that when he looked out the window, you could only see neither mountains nor woods, nor even stream in the garden. "Of course it would be raining," said Edmund. They had just finished their breakfast with the professor upstairs in the room, and he had set apart from them from a long, low room with his 2 windows looking out in one direction and to another. "Do not stop grumbling, Ed," said Susan. 10 to 1, so clear up in an hour or so. And in the meantime, we're pretty well off. There's a wireless and lots of books." There's 2 pictures in this chapter. "Not for me," said Peter. I'm going to explore in the house." Everyone agreed to this, and that's how the adventures began. It was the sort. Oh, now I'm covering the lion's face.
It's okay, honey.
The she's pointed over my head.
Oh. So you could be centered.
How rude. Everyone agreed to this, and now another adventure began. It was all sort of a house they had never seen to come to the end of. It was all full of unexpected places. The first few doors they tried to let in spare bedrooms, as anyone had expected that they would. They came a very long room full of pictures, and they found a suit of armor. After that, the room was hung with green, a harp in one corner, and then came 3 steps down the 5 steps up, and then kind of a little upstairs hall and a door size of room, and that led into each other were lined with books. Most of them were very old books, and some of them were bigger than the Bible in a church. And some of them bigger. And shortly after that, they looked into a room that there was quite empty except for one big wardrobe. The sort that has a looking glass in the door. There was nothing else in the room except for the dead blue bottle on the windowsill. Nothing there, said Peter, and they all now trooped out again, all except Lucy. She stayed because she thought it'd be worthwhile trying the door of the wardrobe, even though she felt almost sure that it would be locked. To her surprise, it was opened quickly, easily, and 2 mothballs dropped out. Oh, in the movie, I thought those were eyeballs. Looking in. Looking into the inside, she saw several coats hanging up, mostly long fur coats. There were nothing Lucy liked so much and smelled and feel. She immediately stepped into the wardrobe, and she got in among the coats and rubbed her face against them, leaving the door open. Of course, because she knew that it was very foolish to shut one, because she knew to shut oneself into any wardrobe. Soon she went further in and found that there were a second row of coats hanging up behind the first one. It was almost quite dark there, and she kept her arms stretched out in front of her so as not to bump her face into the back of the wardrobe. She took a step further, then 2, and then 3 steps, always expecting to feel the woodwork against the tip of her fingers, but she could not feel it. This must be simply an enormous wardrobe. Well, it kind of looks skinny in the picture, but okay, thought Lucy, still going further and pushing soft folds of coats aside to make a room for her. Then she noticed that they saw something crunching under her feet. Crunch, 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 crunch. I wonder, is that more mothballs? She thought. stooping down to feel it with her hands. But instead of feeling the hard, smooth wood on the floor of the wardrobe, she felt something soft and powdery and extremely cold. "This is very queer," she said, and she went on a step or two further. The next moment, she found that she was rubbing against her face, her hands no longer soft fur, but something hard and rough, and even prickly. "Why, it is just like branches of trees," exclaimed Lucy, and then she saw that there were lights ahead of her, not a few inches away from the back of the wardrobe ought to have been, but a long way off, something cold and soft falling on her. A moment later, she found that she was standing in the middle of the wood at nighttime with snow under her feet. Snowflakes were falling through the air. Lucy felt a little frightened, but she felt very exquisite and excited as well. She looked back over her shoulders, and there, between the dark tree trunks, she could still see the open doorway of the wardrobe, and even catch a glimpse of the empty room from which she had sent out. She had, of course, left the door open, for she knew that it was a very silly thing to shut oneself into a wardrobe. But it seemed to be still daylight there. I can always get back if anything goes wrong," thought Lucy. She began to walk forward, crunch, crunch, over the snow and through the wood toward the other lights. In about 10 minutes, she reached it and found a lamppost. As she stood looking at it, wondering why was a lamppost in the middle of the wood, and wondering what to do next. As soon after, a very strange person stepped out from among the trees into the light of the lamppost. He was only a little taller than Lucy herself, and then he carried his head an umbrella, white with snow. From the waist upward, he looked like a man, but his legs were shaped like a goat's. The hair on him was a glossy black. And instead of feet, he had goat hooves, and he also had a tail. But Lucy did not notice this at first because it was neatly caught up over the arm that held the umbrella. One of his hands, and as I've said, he held the umbrella in another arm, and he carried several brown paper bracelets. What with the bracelets, when the snow had just been doing his Christmas shopping. He was a faun, and when he saw Lucy, he gave such a start of surprise that he dropped off his purses. "Goodness gracious me!" exclaimed the faun. I know there's questions. What is Mr. Tubman holding when Lucy meets him at lamppost packages? Is it open or closed? Open. How does Lucy leave the wardrobe when she goes in it? She just leaves it open. She just left it open. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye. Welcome to Reading with Zoe and Friends. Today we are reading the Chronicles of Narnia. Yay! Whoopee! Like I said, Welcome back to Narnia and Friends. Today we are reading the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But instead of reading chapter 2, I'm going to say what happened at the last chapter. Chapter 1, Lucy looks into a wardrobe. When Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy got to the professor's mansion, they wanted to explore the mansion. So when they explored rooms, Lucy saw a room with only a wardrobe in it. So she waited. So she wanted to explore the wardrobe. It was a big wardrobe, but the further she went in, the deeper she got. When she didn't feel coats, she was in land of Narnia. Okay. Alright. I did that. Chapter 2. What Lucy found there. Good evening, said Lucy, but the faun was so busy picking up his packages that at first he did not reply. When it had finished, it made her a little bow. Good evening, said the faun. Excuse me, but I don't want to be exquisite, but should I be right in thinking that you are the daughter of Eve? My name's Lucy, said she, not quite understanding him. But forgive me, you are what they call a girl? Asked the faun. Of course I'm a girl, said Lucy. Are you in fact human? Of course I'm a human, said Lucy, still a little puzzled. To be sure, said faun. How stupid of me. I've never seen a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve before. I am delighted. That is to say. And then he stopped, and he'd been going to say something that I had not intended, but had remembered in time. Delighted, it went on. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Tumnus. Nice to meet you, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy. And may I ask you, Lucy, daughter of Eve, said Mr. Tumnus, how you have come to Narnia. Narnia? What is that? Said Lucy. This is the land of Narnia, said the faun, where we are now, that lies between a lamppost and a great castle of a parable on the eastern sea. And you have come from the wild woods of the west. I got through the wardrobe in a spare room, said Mr. Thomas' rather naturally voice. If I had worked harder than curiosity when I was a little faun, I should no doubt know all about those strange countries. But it is too late now. But they aren't countries at all, said Lucy, almost laughing. It's only just a back there, at least. I'm not sure. It is summer there. Meanwhile, said Mr. Tumnus, it is winter in Narnia. It has been for ever so long, and we shall both catch cold if we stand here talking in the snow. Daughter of Eve, from far land of spare or the endless summer regions around, in a bright city of wardrobe. How would it be if you came at a tea with me? Thank you very much, said Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy, but I've been wondering whether I ought to be getting back. It's only just around the corner, said the faun, and there'll be a roaring fire, and toast, and sardines, and cake. Well, that's very kind of you, said Lucy, but I shan't be able to stay long. If you will take my arm, daughter of Eve, said Mr. Tumnus, I shall be able to hold the umbrella over both of us. That's the way. Now off we go. And so Lucy found herself walking through the wood arm in arm with this strange creature, as if they had known one another all their lives. They had not gone far before they came to a place round became rough, and there were rocks about little hills, and came hills down bottom of one small valley. Mr. Tumnus turned suddenly aside. We're going to walk straight into it on a large rock. But at the last moment, Lucy found that they were leading her into an entrance of a cave. Lucy thought that she had never been in a nicer place. It was a little dry, clean cave, reddish stone with a carpet on the floor and two little chairs. One for me and one for a friend, said Mr. Tumnus, and a table and a dresser and a mantelpiece over the fire. Above that's a picture of an old faun with a gray beard. In the corner there was a door where Lucy must have led to Mr. Tumnus's bedroom. And on one wall there's a shelf full of books. Lucy looked at these while sitting on the tea things. They had titles like The Life of... Mr. Tumnus had books like The Life and Letters of Sidness, or The Nymphs of Their Ways, or Men, Monks, and Gamekeepers, A Study in Popular Legend, or Is a Man a Myth? Now, daughter of Eve, said the faun. Now, and really, it was a wonderful tea. There was a nice brown egg, lightly boiled for each of them, and sardines on toast, and then buttered sardines, and on the buttered toast with honey, and sugar-topped cake. The faun looked quite nice to Lucy, of how nice his home was and how nice he acted. She thought nothing was going to go wrong. If you'll take my arm, daughter of Eve, said Mr. Tumnus, I'll be able to hold the umbrella over both of us. Wait, no, never mind. I just skipped a page. Why is it always winter here? Said Lucy all of a sudden. Well, said the faun, It has been like this for hundreds of years. Never summer, never spring, or never autumn. It has always been winter in the land Narnia. Why is that? Well, if two daughters of Eve and two sons of Adam will defeat the evil witch and win Narnia back with the help of a lion. Mr. Tumnus wanted to change the subject about talking about it. So we asked this to Lucy. Do you mind if I play a little tune with my flute? Lucy was okay with this, but she wondered if the flute would sound good or bad. Then to cheer up this whole situation, he got out a little strange flute that looked as if it was made of straw and began to play. And the tune he played made Lucy want to cry and laugh and dance and go to sleep all at the same time. It must have been hours later when she shook herself and said, "Oh, Mr. Tumnus, I'm sorry, but I had to stop you, and I do love that tune, but really, I must go home. Only meant to stay for a few minutes." "Oh, it's not good of you now, you know," said the faun, laying down on his feet and shaking his head, and very sorrowfully. "No good," said Lucy, jumping up and feeling rather frightened. "What do you mean? I've got to go home at once. Others are wondering what happened to me." But a moment later, she asked, Mr. Tumnus, whatever is the matter?" For the faun's brown eyes had filled with tears, and the tears began trickling down its cheeks, and soon they were running off to the ends of its nose. And at last it covered its face with its hand and began to howl. "Mr. Tumnus! Mr. Tumnus!" said Lucy in great distress. Don't, what's the matter? Aren't you well? Dear Mr. Tumnus, do tell me what's wrong." But the faun continued sobbing as its heart will break. And even when Lucy went over to put her arms and lent him her handkerchief, he did not stop and merely took the handkerchief and kept using it, writing without its hands whenever it got too wet and more use. "Mr. Tumnus!" bawled Lucy in his ear, shaking him. "Do stop at once! Oh, you ought to be ashamed of yourself, a great big faun like you. What on earth are you crying about?" Oh, sobs Mr. Tumnus. "I'm crying because I'm such a bad faun." "I don't think you're a bad faun at all," said Lucy. "I think you're a very good faun. You are the nicest faun I've ever met." You wouldn't say that if you knew," replied Mr. Tumnus between his sobs. "No, I'm a bad faun. I suppose there was ever a worse faun since the beginning of the world." What have you done?" asked Lucy. "My old father Now, my old father now, said Mr. Tumnus. That's the picture over the mantelpiece. He would never have done a thing like this. A thing like what? Said Lucy. Like a thing I've done, said Fawn. Taking service under the White Witch. That's what I am. I'm in pain. The White Witch. The White Witch. Who is she? Why? It's she that she got all Narnia under her thumb. It makes it always winter. Always winter, never Christmas. Think of that. How awful, said Lucy. What did she play you for? That's the worst of it, said Tumnus with a deep groan. I'm a kidnapper for her. That's what I am. Look at me. Daughter of Eve, would you believe? Would you meet me in a poem, me and harm, and pretend to be friendly with it, and invite me to my cave in the sake of rolling and sleep over the White Witch? Oh, I know what he did. No, said Lucy. I'm sure you wouldn't have anything of the sort, but I have, said the fawn. Well, said Lucy rather slowly, for she wanted to be truthful and not to harm on him. Well, that's pretty bad, but you are sorry for... Well, you never do it again. Daughter of Eve, don't you understand? Said the fawn. It isn't something I've done, it's something I'm doing now. It's very moment. What do you mean? Cried Lucy, turning very white. You're the child's. You are the child, said Tumnus. I have orders from the White Witch, and I ever saw the son of Adam or the daughter of Eve in the wood. I was to catch them and hand them over to her, and you are the first I've ever met, and pretending to be your friend and asking for tea. It's all the same, I'm meaning to wait until you're asleep, and then I'll go and tell her. Oh, but you won't, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy. You won't. Will you indeed? You really mustn't. And if I don't, he said, beginning to cry, she'll sure find out. And she'll have my tail cut off, my horns sawn off, and my beard plucked out. And then my beautiful cloven hooves. My beautiful cloven hooves will turn into horrid solid hoods with wrenched hooves. She'll be extra especially angry if it turns me into stone. Now shall be a statue of a fawn, of a horrible house, until 4 thrones of care, praffle, or pen, whatever will happen to all. I'm very sorry, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy, but please let me go home. Of course I will, said the fawn. Of course I have. I've got to go. See that now? I haven't known what humans were like before I met you. Of course I can't give you up to the witch, not now that I know you. But we must be off at once. I see you back up to the lamppost. I suppose you can find your own way there. The spare room and wardrobe. I sure can, said Lucy. We must go as quietly as we can, said Mr. Tumnus. The whole wood is full of her spies. Even some of the trees are on her side. They both got up in a tea, and put an umbrella and gave Lucy his arm, and then went out into the snow. The journey was not that long, but after one yard of walking in the snow, Mr. Tumnus asked. Do you know your way from here, daughter of Eve? Lucy looked very hard between the trees and could just see the distant a patch of light that looked like daylight. Yes, she said. I can see the wardrobe door. Then be home as quick as you can, said the faun. And can you ever forgive me for what I meant to do? Why, of course I can, said Lucy, shaking him heartily by the hand. And I hope you won't get into a dreadful trouble on my accounts. Farewell, daughter of Eve, said he. Perhaps I may keep the handkerchief? Rather, said Lucy. Then he ran toward the far patch of daylight, quickly as her legs would carry her. And then presently, instead of rough branches brushing past her, she felt coats. Instead of crunching snow under her feet, she felt jumping out of the wardrobe in the same empty room, full of adventure that started. The room was tightly behind her and looked around, panting for breath until it was so raining that she could hear the voices of others in the passages. I'm here, she shouted. I'm here. I've come back. I'm all right. Thanks for watching. And those questions. What did Lucy find in Narnia, Mr. Tubman? Whom did she meet? I just told you. What did she learn? Do not go in a stranger's house! Like, seriously, I wouldn't even do that. How are you liking the Chronicles of Narnia of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? I'm like, it's only the second chapter. It's kind of fine. Some challenging words. And I know that I'm supposed to show you this. But excuse me. Wait. Okay. Just wait a minute. I don't know if you can see it, but okay, 1 second. This wardrobe. Well, the coats. The 4 of them walking in. Well, one of them got taken off somewhere. No, it's this side. Yeah. See, got taken off. But I just like saying he already went in. Then over here, see the lamppost. Well, you know. And then Mr. Tubman was here. See his little hoof? Right there, that's his hoof. And his footprints are still there. His hoof prints. He used to be there. Okay. Seriously, I just finished saying questions and you put more questions. Yes, it is a lamppost. Is that Narnia? Yes, this is Narnia. Is that Lucy? The tinier one, yes, and this one. Her in the back. No, her in the front. How old are these bookends? They're older than me. That's all I know. They don't even sell this anymore. They sell a much colorful version. More modern version. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye. Hi, welcome back to Reading with Zoe and Friends. Today we are reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Yeah, the poster says, and here what it says. Oh my the cutie lion. And that lion, so realistic. Well, there's people in the movie. Let's go. Edmund. No. I'm not supposed to read this chapter yet. I am supposed to say what happened at the last chapter. Chapter 2. What Lucy found there. When Lucy walked into Narnia, she found a faun named Mr. Tumnus that invited Lucy to his home. Lucy said yes to this only because Mr. Tubman seemed so nice. So nice to her. When Lucy went into Mr. Tubman's house, he played a tune that made Lucy want to sleep and cry and be happy all at once. But when he stopped, he told her that he kidnapped the child and Lucy was the child. Later on, Mr. Tumnus told her to go and run off to the wardrobe. Dun, dun, dun! Hi, Kai. Hi, Evan. Wait. Why is Evan saying hi to Evan? That's weird. Now I'm going to read. Chapter 3, Edmund and the Wardrobe. Lucy ran out of the empty room into the passage and found the other three. Like I said before. It's all right, she repeated. I've come back. What are you talking about, Lucy? Asked Susan. Why, said Lucy in amazement. Haven't you been wondering where I was? So, you've been hiding, have you? Said Peter. Poor old Lou, hiding, and nobody noticed. You'll have to hide longer than that if you want people to start looking for you. But I've been away for hours and hours, said Lucy. Others stared at one another. Batty, said Edmund, tapping his head. Quite a batty. What do you mean? What do you mean, Lou? Asked Peter. Well, I said, answered Lucy. It was just after breakfast when I went into the wardrobe. And I've been away for hours and hours. And had tea, and all sorts of things had happened. Don't be silly, Lucy, said Edmund. We've only just come out of that room a moment ago, and you were just then. She's not being silly at all, said Peter. She's just making up a story for fun. Aren't you, Lou? And why shouldn't she? No, Peter, I'm not, she said. It's a magic wardrobe. There is a wood inside and snowing. And there's a faun and a witch and it's called Narnia. Come and see, come and see. The others did not know what to think, but Lucy was excited that they all went back with her into the room. She rushed ahead of them, flung open the door of the wardrobe, and cried, "Now, go in and see for yourselves." "Why you go? Why you goose?" said Susan, putting her head inside and pulling her fur coats apart. "It's just an ordinary wardrobe. Look, there's a back of it." Then everyone looked and pulled coats apart. They all saw Lucy and herself in a perfectly ordinary wardrobe. There's no wood and no snow, and the back of the wardrobe with hooks on it. Peter went in and rapped his knuckles and made sure that they were solid. "A jolly good hoax, Lou." he said, and came out again. "You have really taken us in. I must admit, we half believed you." "But it wasn't a hoax at all," said Lucy. "Really and truly. It's all different a moment ago. Honestly, it was, I promise." "Come, Lou," said Peter. "That's going a bit too far. You've had your joke. Hadn't you better drop it now?" Lucy grew very red in her face and tried to say something, though she hardly knew what she was trying to say, and burst into tears. For the next few days, she was very miserable. She could have made it up with the others quite easily at any moment if she could have brought herself to say that the whole thing was only a story made up for fun. But Lucy was very thoughtful girl, and she knew she was really in the right, and she could not bring herself to say this. The others, who thought she was telling a lie, and a silly lie too, made her very unhappy. The two elder ones did without meaning to do it. But Edmund could be spiteful, and on his occasion was spiteful, he sneered and jerked at Lucy and asking if she ever found any other new countries and other cupboards all over the house. What made it worse was that these days ought to have been delightful. The weather was fine, and they were outdoors from the morning to night, bathing, fishing, climbing trees, and lying in the heather. But Lucy could not properly enjoy any of it, and so things went on until the next wet day. That way, when it came to the afternoon, and there were no sign of a break in the weather, they decided to play hide and seek. Susan was it, and as they soon scattered to hide, Lucy went into the room where the wardrobe was. She did not mean to hide in the wardrobe, because she knew that would only set the others talking again about the whole wretched business. But she did want to have one more look inside of it. For by this time, she was beginning to wonder herself whether Narnia and the faun had not been a dream. The house was so large and complicated and full of hiding places that she thought she could have a time to have one look into the wardrobe and then hide somewhere else. But as soon as she reached it, she heard steps in the passage outside, and there was nothing for it but to jump into the wardrobe. and hold the door closed behind her. She did not shut it properly because she knew that it was very silly to shut oneself into a wardrobe. Yes, we know that. Even if it was not a magic one. Now, the steps she heard from that were those from Edmund, and he came into the room just in time to see Lucy vanishing into the wardrobe. He at once decided to get into it himself, not because he thought it a practically good place to hide, but because he wanted to go on teasing her about her imaginary country. He opened the door. There were coats hanging up as usual, and a smell of mothballs, and darkness and silence, and no sign of Lucy. She thinks I'm Susan. Come to catch her, said Edmund to himself. And so she's keeping very quiet and at the back. He jumped and shut the door, forgetting what a very foolish thing it is to do. And he began feeling bad for Lucy in the dark. He had expected to find her a few seconds, but was very surprised he did not. He decided to open the door again and let in some light, but he could not find the door either. He didn't like this at all and began dropping wildly in every direction. He even shouted out, "Lucy! Lou! Where are you? I know you're here!" But no answer, and Edmund noticed that his own voice had curiously the sound you except in a cupboard, the kind of open air sound. And he also noticed that there was unexpectedly cold, and then he saw lights. "Thank goodness," said Edmund. "The door must have swung open of its own accord." And he forgot all about Lucy and went toward the lights, which instead of finding himself stepping out into a spare room, and he found himself stepping out from a shadow of some thick, dark fir trees, and to open a place in the middle of a wood. There was a crisp, dry snow under his feet, and more snow lying on the branches of the trees. Overhead there were a pale blue sky, the sort of sky one sees on a fine winter day in the morning. Straight ahead of him, he saw between the tree trunks the sky just rising, red, very red and clear. Everything was perfectly still, and he, as if he were not one living creature in that country. There was not even a robin or a squirrel among the trees, and the wood stretched as far as he could see in every direction. He shivered. He now remembered that he had been looking for Lucy, and also how unpleasant he had been to her about her imaginary country, which now turned out not to have been imaginary at all. He thought that she must have been somewhere quite close, and so he shouted, "Lucy! Lucy! I'm here too! Edmund! I'm here too, Edmund!" There was no answer. Just like A girl, said Edmund to himself, skulking somewhere, and won't expect an apology. He looked around him again and decided he did not much like this place, and he also made up his mind to go home when he heard very far off in the wood sound of bells, and he listened, and the sound came nearer and nearer, and at last there swept in a sled drawn by 2 reindeer. The reindeer were about the size of Shetland ponies, with their hair was so white that even the snow hardly looked white compared with them. Their branched horns were glided with shone like harnesses, and scarlet leather, all converted with bells. On the sledge driving the reindeer sat a fat dwarf who would have been about 3 feet high, and he was been standing. He was dressed in polar bear fur, and his head wore a red hood with a gold tassel hanging around from its points. His huge beard covered his knees and served him instead of a rug. But behind him, on a much higher seat in the middle of the sledge, sat a very different person, a great lady, taller than any woman that Edmund had ever seen. She also was covered in white fur up to her throat, and held a long straight golden wand in her right hand, and wore a golden crown over her head. Her face was white, not merely pale, but white like snow or pepper or icing sugar, except for her very red mouth. It was a beautiful face in other respects, but proud and cold and stern. The sledge was fine and straight, and came up sweeping toward Edmund with the bells jingling up on the dwarf, crackling and whipping, and the snow flying on each side of it. "Stop!" said the lady. "Stop!" said the lady, and the dwarf pulled down the reindeer up so sharp that they almost sat down. They recovered themselves by stood stamping their bits and blowing. In the frosty air, the breath of coming out in the nostrils looked like smoke. "And what, pray, are you?" said the lady, looking hard at Edmund. My name's Edmund," said Edmund, rather awkwardly. He did not like the way she looked at him. The lady frowned. Is that how you address a queen?" she asked, looking stern than ever. "I beg your pardon, your majesty. I didn't know," said Edmund. "Did not know the Queen of Narnia," she said. "Ah! You shall know to be better, Heather. But I repeat, what are you?" "Please, your majesty," said Edmund. Don't know what you mean. I'm at school, and at least I was. It's the holidays now." And I know there's questions. Thanks for watching. Can I answer the questions? Why was the lady's face as white as snow? I couldn't say why. Then I'll ruin it. Why did Edmund forget about Lucy when he stepped into Narnia? The other was like, what the? Would you had a wardrobe during hide and seek? No. I wouldn't. I really wouldn't. It's too dark. I asked Fearful as Lucy. Well, I don't know what fearful means. Goose? Wow, goose is like chicken. Like, are you chicken? Like that. Like, bark, bark. Like that. Thanks for watching. Bye!